Hey everybody, so a lot of you have been asking me to speak on this article here. It looks like this person had several logic boards replaced, had cables in the screen replaced, the entire machine replaced after about 2 weeks of time, and it still did not resolve this issue where the screen brightness was actually turned all the way down, and that was the only problem with the machine. A lot of you have asked me to chime in on this. So long story short, this person liked having the machine with no brightness on the screen. They wanted the internal screen to be off so that they were only going to be looking at their external, and the external would be the only screen that's on. However, they decided not to have it closed because even if you set the machine to not go to sleep when you close it, he claims that there were cases where that would happen and it would be glitchy. So just to make life easy, he would just turn the brightness all the way down and then he would connect it to an external and that would all work. Now the one problem here is if you forget to put the brightness back up before you reboot, it's not going to have the brightness on when you reboot. So you're not going to see anything on the screen until you boot up all the way into the operating system. Now, when you boot up all the way into the operating system, it's still going to be dark until you log in. And on the touch bars, your brightness buttons are on the touch bar. And the touch bar doesn't work until you log in. So you have no way to bring the brightness up without logging in. You need to see the screen in order to log in. You cannot see the screen with no brightness, so it becomes this catch-22 of you not having a working machine. Now, what was interesting here, and where this is something that's a bit more understandable when it comes to the newer models, is that anything after the A1286s, the A1278s, the A1297s, where they were using the pre-Retina screen, is that it is way more difficult to be able to see if there is an image on the screen if there's no backlight. So on the older models, if there's no backlight, you could still kind of see a picture. On the Retinas, it is really difficult to see. And on the new ones, it's virtually impossible to see. So on the old ones, what I used to be able to do is I could take my microscope light here, and I would shine the microscope light through the apple in the back of the screen, and that would be how I would backlight the screen in order to see if there's a picture. On the new machines, anything that has a USB-C port on it, you no longer have that translucent apple in the back where I can shine light through it. It's solid, so there's no way for me to artificially backlight the screen if the backlight inside of it doesn't work. Now, you could put a flashlight up to the front of the screen, but it's not the same. It's still very difficult to see. So what we have here is a very common issue that I talk about in many of my board repair videos, which is diagnosing no image versus no backlight, because no backlight is different from no image. Now, they clearly had failed to do that. They could not tell the difference between no image versus no backlight, which is why they had this problem. And somebody at the Genius Bar finally decided at the end of this article to use common sense and see that there was a little circle where you could see the login avatar, so you could tell that there was an image but no backlight. And they just decided, okay, we're just going to type the first letter of your username, which is going to then bring us to the part of the screen where you could type in the password for your username, hit enter, bam, and you're in, and then you can bring the brightness up. Now, a lot of people have been wondering about this because the title does kind of make it sound like, $10,000 of repairs. But one of the reasons that I don't really care about this and why I haven't responded to it, why I don't find it to be a large issue, is its warranty. So it wasn't paid for by the consumer. So I don't have an issue with Apple wasting their resources for a consumer. I have an issue with Apple wasting the customer's resources. So the reason in the case where the CBC News had went to the Apple Store, the reason that was somewhat bothersome was they were telling the end user $1,200 to $2,000 for a bent pin when, again, that board did not have liquid damage on it. The people who said it did were full of it. Even if you did not want to bend the pin back, you could have simply just replaced the screen cable or just replace the screen assembly but not replace everything. So that was offensive because they would have been billing the end consumer, whereas here they're billing themselves. If the company wants to have a troubleshooting process where people do somewhat stupid things and it costs them money, I don't really care about that. And I can also understand this because A, the Retina screens are very difficult to see if there's an image when there's no backlight. B, they took away the translucent Apple logo, which makes it virtually impossible to use anything to light up the screen. Even if you put a flashlight to the screen, you're really not going to see it the same way you used to see it before. Is it asinine? Yes. Did the consumer wind up paying for it? No. And I also do wonder if the consumer told the individual at Apple exactly how this problem came to be. If the person said, hey, I use my computer with the brightness all the way down, it got stuck with the brightness all the way down, I kind of wonder, because I've honestly gotten tricked by this before, and, I'm not above this. I have gotten tricked to the point where I fix a board, I know it works, I test it, I give it to the reassembly people, they say, no image. I get it back, I test it works, I give it to the reassembly people, no image. And then at some point I realized that the key to reduce the backlight is actually stuck down on the keyboard, so the moment it turns on, it's automatically sending the backlight to the lowest setting. And I have been trolled by that before. But I think that that's an okay thing to be trolled by because, again, it did not result in the customer getting a higher bill. What I care about is whether or not your stupidity results in the customer getting a higher bill. In that case, my stupidity and my reassembly tech stupidity at the same time, we're both equally dumb here because we both got trolled by this for 3 days, it wound up not costing the customer. It cost us our time, it cost us our sanity, it did not cost the customer, in which case it does not really bother me. I've had issues where I got trolled way worse than this. Steve and I are never going to forget the case of this one customer having a board repair. It would work. He'd come in, his trackpad would work funny. And then he'd leave, and we'd test it, and it would work. And then he'd come in, and his trackpad would work funny. And the mouse would be moving scattered as if his trackpad was water damaged. And then he'd leave, and it would work fine. And then he came back in. And each time he came back, he would be a little bit madder than he was the time before. A little bit more passive-aggressive. A little bit more douchey, implying that we sucked at our job. So at one point, we decided, we're going to get you. We're going to see if there's anything you're doing to sabotage this repair. So we took our 1500-volt DC tennis racket and our cattle prod, tied him down, and looked through his bag. And after going through his bag in a TSA fashion, we realized that he had a Bluetooth mouse in his bag that was turned on. That Bluetooth mouse would pair with the machine every time he came into the store, and he was not turning it off to save battery or save us from torture. So every time he came in, that little Bluetooth mouse in his bag was moving around, moving the cursor on the screen, and causing him to think that we messed up his trackpad when we fixed his motherboard. Is it our fault? Is it his fault? Is it both of our faults? I would kind of say it's both of our faults. I should be able to think ahead and realize, well, how else could the pointer on this machine move? Maybe it could be a Bluetooth mouse. Let's disable Bluetooth entirely in case something's pairing. Or we should have been able to catch the fact that a Bluetooth mouse was pairing every time he showed up and it didn't work, but we weren't because we were too focused on him giving us passive-aggressive looks, that whole, I had to make another trip here since you didn't fix it properly. Should he be aware that when he puts his Bluetooth mouse in his bag that maybe he should turn it off, not just to save the battery, so that it doesn't fucking troll the repair shop? Yes. Are we idiots? Yes. Was he an idiot? Kind of, sort of. So it's one of those things where you do have to... You can blame the tech, but you also got to blame the user a little bit there just for the fact that they're doing something somewhat non-standard and they're not making you fully aware of it. At the end of the day, I'm not typically one that's going to defend an Apple genius. This is a non-standard case. And again, at the end of the day, they did solve the problem. 2 weeks is a bit long, but again, they at least solved it. And B, they did not bill the customer for their stupidity, which at the end of the day, to me, is the most important thing. If you bill the customer for your own stupidity, my heart pumps piss for you. If you bill yourself for your own stupidity, I can live with that. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something.